Good afternoon, and welcome to the session on game on or game over. A key reason that Europe is not building global tech companies is that the single market for services is not harmonized. If you take all the regulatory barriers to service trade in Europe, they amount to an estimated 110% tariff. Such fragmentation means that the returns to scaling are much lower in Europe than in the US or China, which have large harmonized domestic markets. And in addition, there are much higher compliance costs. If you look at well-meaning regulations like GDPR and the EU AI Act, they create barriers to entry for startups, whereas large companies have managed to offset compliance costs by capturing a larger share of the market. The European Commission has just concluded a public consultation and call for evidence on one of the most transformative opportunities for European startups and investors in years. If implemented properly, it could deliver one single pan-European legal entity, fully digital incorporation, seamless scaling, lower complexity and cost. So here to discuss EU Inc., and a number of the other challenges and opportunities in the European market are Hedi Mardisoo, who is co-founder and CEO of Cachet, a global startup. She's also a member of the European Startup and Scale-Up Forum, a board member of Allied for Startups, and sits on the board of the Estonian Founders Society, where she advocates for stronger support structures for entrepreneurs across Europe. Next to her, we have Simon Schaefer, entrepreneur and angel investor, who's currently president of the Global Startup Association, Allied for Startups, and he's the co-initiator of EU Inc. And we have Borlongan, who has spent the past decade working across nearly every part of Europe's startup landscape, from policy and founding to operations and investment. She currently serves on the board of the European Innovation Council, the EU's 10 billion euro deep tech investment arm, and helped shape the EU startup and scale-up strategy as part of the Startup Scale-Up Forum. Earlier, she led the French tech mission under President Emmanuel Macron's, helping develop and execute the startup strategy that was pivotal to reshaping France's startup scene. So we've got the right people here in the room. Let's dive right into our discussion. Europe should be the easiest place in the world to grow a business. If we have a single market with more than 450 million consumers, yet self-imposed hurdles act as the equivalent of tariffs for our companies. Entrepreneurs are being denied the full benefits of Europe's scale. So let's talk about how EU Inc. aims to fix that and where we are in the process. Let's start with you.
Sure. Thanks for having me. This is fantastic to be here. And I'm very happy to be able to talk about these things today here at this fantastic conference. I am an entrepreneur myself. I've invested in several companies across Europe, and I'm German originally, and now I live in Lisbon, so I'm European all the way. And several times in the past 10 years, I've been lobbying on the EU level for startups and lowering barriers and easing the entry points for companies and investors to the innovation economy. And a very smart lady that used to work in the Berlaymont told me once, Simon, you startup people are always good news, and good news doesn't give you political agency. So what do you do with that message? And I feel partly guilty in that because, yes, you always talk about how many jobs created, how many millions were raised. But in reality, since I would argue the Letta report and the Draghi report, there's a sense of urgency that the innovation economy needs to catch up in Europe against the big blocks. As a group of friends, we put together a WhatsApp group discussing this, and the result was EU Inc., where we looked at a very simple problem. If, as an investor, you're looking to invest anywhere in Europe, and you're not from that member state country, let's say you're not even American, you're even from Germany trying to invest in Spain, the first thing you need to do as you're investing other people's money is to understand the legal pitfalls that the corporate law of that country may have or may not have. Taxation, labor law, everything that comes to play when investing into a business. And now, early stage momentum, investing in companies and finding smart capital across the block is obviously significantly impacted by that fact. So your resources are less efficient, your investment capital is less likely to go across borders, and I would go one step further. I would argue European venture capital largely operates within its home market, and with that, the size of the funds is largely proportional to the size of that market they are from. So to create a online-based, simply accessible, and we're in Estonia, so very much like what you guys already have here, but to create that for Europe and have a single corporate law rule set with which you can invest anywhere in the 27 member states, if you so wish, without going through additional hurdles, was the origin of how we came up with this. We got to 16,000 people that signed the petition really quickly. There was a lot of political support from the 28th regime concept, which is a little bit different, but it's very likely similar to what the EU Inc. as a result. And here we are now with a consultation that just closed with, I think, quite a lot of feedback from the community and a lot of feedback from startups and VCs. And yeah, we hope that this will actually take down some of the barriers we all face.
So let's talk about some of those barriers, because Hedi, you face them with your company, which is rolled out across Europe. So tell us a little bit about, what it's like on the ground and why we need this act.
Mm-hmm. So a very typical example of a startup. I have 5 companies, 2 or 3 in Estonia, 1 in Poland, and 1 in Ireland. To run the business. And if I would hire someone, let's say in Germany or France, I likely have to build another company, because digital single market passporting for license in insurance works beautifully, but then the realities are kicking in left, right, and center. So our reality is we have Estonian license, which we have passport across Europe, which operates well if there's a very lean setup of insurance. As soon as I want to bring local people on board, then different rules will apply. As soon as I want to sell directly to the consumers, a whole new set of rules will jump in. Plus, we will get also additional kind of rules and gold plating. It's a term that is probably quite widely known in policy world, but basically that if there's one regulation kind of incepted in a country, then enacted in a country, then basically they add additional layers, which either to localize it better or to bring something else. So there's going to be tiny differentiations in every country. And for the young startup, it adds lots of complexity. And besides only getting up what is meant for, let's say, someone that holds a distribution license, insurance distribution license in Europe, you actually get also lots of regulation that is meant for some of your partners who are bigger and who you depend on. But that's a very practical example. The other why I have other companies is also linked with investment, and exactly what Simon was saying, that we were actually kind of semi-forced to flip, even though Estonia has a really great ecosystem, and you really want to run your company here, and are a bit scared that what the Germans might come up with. That's the joke between us when talking about EU Inc. So hopefully even better than we have something that today. And what maybe one more, since I am speaking also here on behalf of majority of the big Estonian founders in the Founder Society, just to kind of put here the kind of benchmark already. Estonia is small, but startups are going to make this year likely almost 5% of our GDP. So it's not anymore 0 point something on the schema. It's actually sizable. And the question is for us, and when we talk about one is investment, and obviously very happy about getting something little started, but we actually quickly need more, and that's where the problem comes, because investors can come and invest in you, but if you can't scale with speed, you anyway will go to US. If I will do my proof of concept in Estonia, I have to choose whether I'll do the same journey again. Let's say if I would sell my company, I would start to really think, because it's cumbersome, and getting older and all this. Anyway.
So, Kat, what do you see as the urgency for this EU Inc? What gets you excited about the idea of actually getting this passed?
Oh, I love this. This is like an ad for you, Simon. Let's take EU Inc. in its sort of broader context. So I just learned this while you were reciting the bios, actually, but we all sit on the same advisory group with Commissioner Zarieva. And I don't know if any of you are aware, and it's sad, very few people are, but there's actually this thing called the Startup Scale-Up Strategy, which was launched in May, which contains 25 or 26? 26? of the flagship initiatives that the Commission will be pushing in order to make Europe a better place, or one of the best places to start and scale global tech companies, right? And you know what? I would trade all 25 or 26 of them for a proper single market. There are a lot of things in there, everything from revising M&A rules to boosting accelerators in different regions and so on. But the truth is, the work that Simon and the community behind him is doing is just kind of like, as Hedi said, it's just the backbone. It's just the mission-critical foundation without which any of the other sort of fancier, shinier initiatives that have big billion-euro amounts attached to them won't really work. Because I think where we get a little confused sometimes, and I say we as someone who's been in government for quite a bit, policymaker in France, and then working with the Commission, is that we think startups need to be helped and we need to give them things, right? Like we need to create programs to fund them, and we need to teach them how to pitch or whatever. But at the end of the day, what startups are looking for is revenue. And so our priority aggressively needs to be market access. So that's the integration of a proper single market. And then we'll probably get into that, a bit of B2B stuff as well.
Okay, so, the fact that we need a single market for startups, we want a single market for startups, it's been on the table for decades, literally. What makes you optimistic that this can work? And what will it take? Because even if every single member state said, oh yeah, we'll do a directive on that, where will that leave us?
Oh, don't get me started on
No, you said the D word.
No, but I think we need to put that on the table, that the whole structure of the way things happen in the EU is just not working because the directives are not laws, right? So we need a law.
Yeah, look, I think the biggest challenge that you face is that the European Union was conceptualized as a peace project. And as such, we're now living in different times, and we're very close to the horrors that go on between Ukraine and Russia. And this is a catalyst for innovation as we've rarely seen in the last 100 years. So the deployment of drones, of AI, of autonomous systems is so rapidly changing that really nobody in Europe knows what's going on in contemporary warfare. And that's a huge problem because we need to be able to defend our constitutions. And I understand from where I have been following in more detail that is not lost, that is not impossible, but it requires for us a systemic change in how we see the innovation industry and its contribution to not just economy, but also safety and sovereignty. And the way we see it is that this new urgency has reached the top ranks of the political sphere. So I think there's largely political agreement that we need to win with the innovation economy. I always say it's not even a race, so why win? But we need to empower entrepreneurs to be successful because that's where that stability and safety might come from. But in order to achieve that, I think there's a lot of less Europeanizing itself necessary, a lot less thinking the way we have in the past. It's a step change. It's a cultural step change that needs to take place. And I hope that the circumstance for that is there now. I really believe that we're in a moment in time where it's possible.
So move beyond the nation state and start thinking about Europe Inc. And what Europe can do, not just what Estonia or France or Germany can do. And so would you look at EU Inc. as sort of the first step in that kind of federalism?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's tough to say it that way because then it might get even more pushback than it does now. But yeah, it's a step into that direction. And I think one of the famous sayings of the Commission has always been there's only those member states that know they are small and those that don't know yet that they are small. So collectively is the only chance, and I think the numbers speak for themselves. 450 million consumer market, and still fractionalized, still enabled to access that as a company from day one across the board. That just simply makes no sense. And I think we're getting to a point where the bigger member states will buy into it, and have to say the Nordics, have been marching forward on this with a lot of success already for some time. So there's just probably also a lot of best practice we need to look at and take up on.
Okay, so when we talk about that best practice, let's talk about, okay, what is a European startup? So, Lovable, the Swedish vibe coding service, they, made a lot of splash in the press saying we want to be Europe's first trillion-dollar company. There's only one problem. It's actually incorporated in the United States. And so that makes it legally American. And their dual identity kind of perfectly encapsulates this Europe's digital sovereignty paradox. So the company operates from Stockholm, it employs Swedish talent, it benefits from Sweden's excellent technical university, and the CEO speaks confidently about Europe being a great place to build a software company. Yet, when it comes time to establish to incorporate, it turns to the US. So is that a good thing, a bad thing? Is it okay for some companies to do that? What is the definition of a European startup? And is this something we have to fix?
Okay, so let's unpack a few things there. Right? There's the case of Lovable, which is, I wouldn't say a specific case, but it's a certain class of cases, right? I think we need to separate the discussion on, European companies that are set up and that are based in Europe, but then decided to incorporate in Delaware, versus, and we had this discussion earlier, companies that are European that decide to actually flip their headquarters, their R&D, and their teams over to the US. Two separate issues. In the first case, Lovable is a Lovable European company. So by official EU definition, no, we're pretty black and white about where the legal headquarters are. But would I go as far as to countering them saying you're not European? Their first investors were European. Like the seed round was led by, it was a Hummingbird based in Belgium and a syndicate of many European investors. Pre-Series A, I think, was led by Corriendum. Series A, led by Accel. So it's not even the funding piece. Why Delaware? Because they don't pay taxes. I don't know. It's like you can do a whole thing about why the U.S. is great, but at the end of the day, Delaware is a specific thing. It's because you pay 0% corporate taxes versus 25% in France and Estonia. I think is it around 20? Is it 0? Or come to Estonia. There you go. So I think there's a lot of that. And then the second piece, though, which for me is the real issue, is should we be worried as when you're talking about sovereignty, about our companies that we've invested in and that are in a lot more mission critical verticals? Lovable is a consumer,
right?
Like, what about quantum? What about semiconductors? What about advanced radar, advanced manufacturing? How would we feel if they went and flipped over to the U.S.? And I think that's a very, very different question, and that's not something that can be fixed by just adjusting corporate tax laws. That's something that needs to be addressed at an ecosystem level. And if I were to pick, if we could fight only 3 battles for that, definitely, and not just because you're here, Simon, definitely 28th regime, something we don't talk about as much because it's not as sexy and seems very specialized, but it's so necessary, which is the Savings and Investment Union. So really having a deep, liquid, full stack capital market all the way from first angel ticket to IPO. And the third one, which I suspect we're going to get into, is the very thorny issue on procurement, on how Europe tends to spend a lot of its money in supporting and investing, but maybe not enough as a client.
Okay. Hedi.
I'll jump on that one because I think I'll be a bit of a devil's advocate here, because I went to see literally one of the kind of most important company CEO speaking a few hours ago on a stage there. And even in this auditor, which is full of Europeans, full of policymakers, full of everybody, the room was half empty. So we actually, we talk all about AI and everything, and we had the most important AI company in Europe on a stage there, and the room was empty. So, sorry, being devil's advocate here, I think that's something to think about. The reality is that we need to care. We need to be curious, and we need to know which companies we have in Europe, because one of the core problems is also Europeans don't buy stuff from European companies. We invest outside, we put our pension money to exactly real estate, and we don't look deeper, take risks, and actually invest and use European stuff. I think that's, if we have one quick call to action here, make sure you go and listen to Mistral next time. But jokes aside, care and actually look into using European stuff, what is out there.
I kind of want to add to that as well. So, if I look at the EIC's portfolio, so we've invested about 300 companies and have deployed about 5 billion already. And out of the 300 companies, barely over 1% has flipped to the US.
Okay.
And in almost all of the cases, and there's one sadly famous case, which is that of Heart Aerospace, which some of you might know, which is a hybrid electric aircraft company that was based in Gothenburg, Sweden, and packed up and moved to LA earlier this year. In almost every case you see, and again, specific, right? EIC is a deep tech portfolio. It's always because of where the customer base and the partner base is. Like for now, and at least I can't talk about all of Europe, but for the 300 companies that we have, it's almost always been that. So that's a problem that definitely needs to be addressed urgently.
Simon, you wanted to add
And if I may, to add to both of you, I think we also need to celebrate our wins properly.
Yeah.
We're so terrible at sort of highlighting those that are part of what is successful now. I'm giving one example, which is ASML. ASML is a company that produces the machines that are then shipped to Taiwan, where the chips are built, and they've been designed by NVIDIA. But this is part of the most relevant food chain or chain that we can be. And it's a European company, and it's the only one that can do these things at this level right now. So if anything, and this also plays into Mistral and the empty room, and of course also into what's there in deep tech, like some of the easy things to look at and to celebrate are consumer companies, because they are so present, and they raise hundreds of millions and whatnot. But there's so much deep industrial knowledge, know-how, and successful businesses that we just don't talk about because it's not sexy. Yeah.
I kind of want to ride on that, Simon, because we said we need to celebrate our wins, but also we need to stop putting the U.S. on a pedestal. Like this isn't 2020 anymore, right? A lot of things have changed. We're talking about a country that currently today, we're always talking about, oh no, we're going to lose them to the U.S. We're talking about a country that currently, today has defunded a lot of its research to the point that it's triggering a massive brain drain. A country that is cracking down on immigration and in very unsavory ways. But as far as tech is concerned, you now have the price tag of $100K for H-1B visas and a lot of restrictions for a country whose tech ecosystem is mostly fueled by immigration. We were worried about climate tech for the long time because of IRA, which they've also rolled back. And when it comes to funding, yes, it's true. There's a lot of dry powder still in VC in the U.S. And yes, the U.S. is still leading all of the mega deals, AI and biotech. But in terms of actual volume and number of tickets, Europe has already caught up. And that has to do also with the sheer number of startups that are being created in Europe, which is currently higher today than that of the US. So there are so many reasons to be optimistic and so many reasons to really seize this opportunity.
Okay, so before we go into the next question, I just wanted to say that if anybody in the audience have questions, you can use that QR code and send your question in, and we'll try to get to at least a couple of them before we run out of time. So one of the questions that I think the big elephant in the room I think we have to address is, where Europe is on AI, because right now the conversation globally is like US versus China, and Europe is just not really in the conversation. So is it game on or game over for Europe in AI? Are there areas where we think that Europe can excel, and what are they? Who wants to take that?
I want to actually, I'll come to that question, but start by challenging a bit. I literally landed from San Francisco last night, and I don't know how many in this room has used Waymo taxis. Maybe you can give me a hand up. One person. This was a crazy experience. I drove around it. It goes with the speed of, and by the way, I'm actually insuring Uber and Bolt drivers, so I can't talk about that maybe publicly, but the experience was incredible, that I wouldn't really want to maybe go back to the car with the person anymore. They drove as taxis, same speed, same maneuvering, everything. So if we're talking about US not being ahead of, what they are really ahead of is actually putting all those technologies into use. And I think if we're talking about, maybe then back to the AI question, this is something what Europe can really kind of now catch up with. Is, I was in the room with very, very seasoned investors like Ben Horowitz, etc., and they were talking very pragmatically about China, etc. But we don't talk. I haven't heard us talking maybe that pragmatically. Your question was correct. What can we do in a way about AI? So US was saying yes, China is ahead of in two things: OpenAI and really fastly copying what the US is doing. So we can as well. So, but back to your question, I think that what Europe really has to do and can do is really trying to roll out quickly lots of solutions. And I know, okay, way more, which takes probably many years, but alikes that actually reach the practical use, practical purposes, and from my side, everybody's today talking about the efficiency, often in-house. And that's something that my company does as well, and that could be also putting our GDPR into good use, is actually doing the data portability, which is obviously very much lobbied often against by incumbents, but to open up the data ports to really like smaller startups. And there will be many, many different opinions, but that would really make Europe move to a completely different place. How can we use the cross company data to bring out new innovative solutions in services and use exactly AI to power that? And I think that would, if someone would ask what would be one of my favorite areas where we could excel with, is actually put this cursed word of GDPR into actually good use and make the most of that.
So then, building on what you've just said, can, like, using the label trustworthy AI, trustworthy data, transparent data, is that something that Europe should build on? Is that a way for us to differentiate?
I think absolutely 100%. I would go one step further. I think that currently with the fractalization that we're having and that we're building systems to hopefully overcome infrastructural layers that make this better, the multicultural existence of Europe should be an advantage and not a hindrance. And I think you see that mostly when you see American companies scaling across Europe or across the world. There's always this point of where culturally it's not quite adaptable, it's not quite exactly how we would have been doing it in Europe. And the question is, isn't that our core advantage? Isn't that actually where we can deliver by building global companies from day one? And this goes a lot back to trust, because ultimately I believe having trust in our government, having trust in the frameworks that we've created socially as well as morally, is something that Europe could excel in and could take it into the economic realm, and it hasn't yet successfully. I think that's a huge opportunity.
Okay. Kat, do you want to add anything to that?
I'm just so happy to not be in government anymore when you answer a question like that. No, because it's true, right? I mean, we want to be very excited about it and be like, yes, go Europe. But I feel like for a lot of things, the ship has kind of sailed, right? Like, I don't know, I don't think it's sailed like it's sailed for social networks. But, there are some things where I think Europe just needs to be very strategic. I can tell you what we're excited about at the EIC in terms of the companies that we are seeing and that we're investing in, at least when it comes to AI. We do have like a few LLMs, but I think what we're really excited about and what we're seeing, especially with regards to the general sort of dynamic in the portfolio, are investments in the application layer of AI and specifically applied to industry, which is where so much of Europe's economy rests. So I think it's a mix of both. It's a lot of small-scale LLMs applied to industry, and also, as Hedi said, and you're from Estonia, so you're a lot more optimistic when it comes to tech adoption. I'm from France, so a little different. But I don't think, I think that 100% where we have to be better is in the adoption and the deployment of these small-scale LLMs in industrial contexts, from pilot all the way to large scale.
I wanted to talk about, does Europe need a clear vision of where we want to go? Going back to what Laura Gilbert said earlier today, rather than let technology define us, we need to define what we want from the technology, right? And if we want a technology that encapsulates European values, then what does that look like? And what areas do we want to work on first? What technologies, will differentiate Europe and help us to move ahead? And that brings me to this, what Europe has traditionally done, which is to spend really heavily on public R&D and these large multi-party consortia, and that diffuse accountability, and they pull in different directions, and we end up, not being able to deliver commercial breakthroughs. So what do we need to do to change that system and set these priorities so that we know where we're going and we have a chance to excel?
Yeah, I can start on that. So I think when you're talking, it's okay. We can shame, and you're trying to Horizon Europe's 2020 mega consortiums of like 30, 40, 50 different entities. Although in fairness, for those apply mostly to research projects, and for a lot of them, if you're doing, say, like environmental sampling and need 27 member states, it's very hard to find a single entity. At the EIC, we do a lot of single company investing. And I think you touched on something that was so important in the beginning, Jennifer, and something that actually is almost kind of emotional for me as someone who's been doing a lot of this work, is we're talking about game on or game over, but what's the game, right? What's the game? If you talk to different policymakers, there's actually, everybody will do like hashtag startups, growth, unicorns, hooray. But when you say, do we need a vision? I don't think there's currently clear alignment amongst member states and the EU on what winning actually looks like. So for many, and I feel like a lot of the consultations kind of happen like this, and you can sort of correct me if your experience has been different, but a lot of the consultations have been about how do we help startups? How do we, and it's a very constituency-oriented type of support, meaning like, okay, we have, X thousand startups, and how do we make them, more satisfied with how the European Union is functioning? And so, sometimes that's great, but sometimes that leads to some things where, we over-index on early stage grants, or we over-index on making sure that we try to have like 27 different unicorns for everything, 27 different unicorns in quantum, 27 different unicorns in semiconductors, 27 different unicorns. Whereas, I think there's this other alternative vision where the goal is closer to, and you spoke about it earlier, like the $1 trillion company or beyond that, right? I think the goal is to be in a place where you can consistently produce global market leaders. And moving towards something like that, I think requires, not just the sort of decorative tinkering of some of the measures that are here, but I think it requires and allow me to say this word, it requires a certain like ruthlessness and focus, which I don't think is present in any of the debates that we're having in those terms.
But it is present in the U.S. and in China, for sure.
Yeah, we need a little bit more ruthlessness. Is going to be the conclusion.
Do you wanted
here.
to say something?
So yes, I think we can line up the technologies. It's easy. Is it quantum? Is it biotech, etc.? All are coming. But I think one of the key things that I brought it out in a couple of places as well, is we don't know what's going to be the full next breakthrough technology. So it's more about building up actually the mechanism of being agile inside Europe and actually doing things together. That could be one of the core vision. We really need to figure out how to catch up quickly. So that's one. And the second one, which is quite controversial as well, but I was on the stage of research and innovation a couple of months ago in Brussels, and I got, I think, 50 emails after from scientists, which saying out one thing, and innovators was, so today we are all talking about new technologies, but one thing that we're ignoring, in order to make the new technologies fly, we need to kill old technologies as well. So I'm trying to integrate my solution with old insurance companies' APIs, or they're not called APIs, they're called web services. So good luck with that. And that's one of the benchmarks. But if you're talking about bringing big AI solutions, quantums, etc., and actually then going down to the rabbit hole of old technologies, so maybe Europe should actually have a policy that if you add something, you should kill something.
Great idea. And I know
zombie policy.
I know you want to say something, and I'm going to let you do it, but we're almost out of time, and I promised I would try to get at least one question in, and I'm going to ask it to you, Simon. Somebody in the audience wants to know, should there be a one EU-level super regulator instead of 27 national ones? Or would that also be a nightmare?
I mean, all of these questions point towards federalization. And it's something that, I mean, we've been discussing behind the scenes. And I would argue that many of the step changes we need to do point towards that direction: collective budget, collective taxation, collective defense, etc., etc. But I would argue the main thing that we need to do is we need to take the problem by the horn, which is we need to really dive into startups and what startups mean in startup culture, and we need to build the infrastructure for early stage. There's so much along the way that needs to be fixed. We need to have later stage funding in the global scale, etc., etc. But we're still struggling with the founding part. We're still struggling with the very beginning of it. So that's why I think EU Inc. and what we're trying to do there is actually just an infrastructural component for the innovation economy. And there are several things that come later. And if you think bottom up and top down, okay, let's start bottom up, build one legal system, top down, build the exit potential. And that's what you brought up, the Capital Markets Union, or the savings and
it's been rebranded.
New branding,
so
whatever.
Yeah.
But that's in between there is the innovation economy, and that's what we have to take really serious, and we don't.
Okay, so we have 22 seconds. Okay, so your call to action is get EU Inc. done.
Yeah, start with that.
Okay, Hedi, your call to action.
I can sign to the EU Inc. Or the 28 regime, but my action would be that every member states need to start to look every question when it comes to defense, innovation, what is okay to sacrifice for the sake of all as an entity.
For more Europe.
Yeah, exactly.
Kat, you have the last word.
Everyone in here is a potential buyer, whether you're a startup, you're a corporate, you're in government, and I think that's really the key to unlocking everything. We're not going to outspend the US, we're not going to outspend China, we're not going to outinvest them. We can't play the same game, so we have to be smarter, and part of that means taking a step to unlocking our own markets.
Okay, great. With that, please give a nice round of applause to our panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure.